Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Sandy Hirsch, and I am the director of the San Jose State University School of Information and the sponsor of this Library 2.0 webinar series that we're really excited to be launching. We have been doing these Library 2.0 conferences for free since 2011, so this is our 5th year. We're really pleased about that and pleased about sponsoring and working with Steve Hargadon and the Library 2.0 community to host these. And we're very excited that we have with us today Richard Hulser, who is the Chief Librarian and Curator at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, who will be speaking with us today to kick off our very first webinar for the Library 2.0 series. He has over 35 years of experience in library and information management, and he is a frequent speaker, and we're pleased that he is choosing today to speak with us. So welcome, Richard.
Hi, Sandy, and hi, everybody. So I will go ahead and see if this works here. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my screen. Steve, can you just verify that for me?
We do see your screen.
Okay, good. So I can go ahead.
Yes, please.
Alrighty. So welcome everybody, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be the inaugural speaker of this web series. Thank you, Dr. Hirsch and Steve, for our wonderful technical help. And I'm going to talk today about negotiations and partnerships. And the subtitle I gave it is how to make the most out of what you have and get what you need. And so we're just going to go ahead and talk about this. Now, the areas I want to talk about, the topics are negotiations or partnerships, what kinds of things you need to think about for negotiation considerations, taking the negative out of negotiations, partnership elements, and then just review it all for everyone. So and then ask for questions after that. So hold your questions to the end because we're using a new thing with the Google Hangouts, and I can't see questions while I'm presenting. So you know, I'll rely on Sandy and Steve to take a look at those and interrupt me if need be. But otherwise, we'll handle those at the end. So let's talk about me for a minute, and so you understand where I'm coming from and why where these thoughts of mine come up, where they come from. So my experience is pretty variable. Professional experience, although I'm born and raised in New York, I've lived elsewhere, including going to graduate school at Utah State University and at the University of Denver for my library degree in Denver and my education master's at Utah State. But from Utah State, I became an academic librarian and eventually the director of the Snow College Library there. And when I went back to library school, I interned at IBM and ended up working for IBM for 18 years in lots of different jobs, first as a librarian and then on the marketing and sales side. And that's where I got a lot of experience in negotiation and partnerships with a lot of institutions globally, in addition to the United States, and where a lot of these principles I've learned and used over the years have come in handy in multiple ways, and I want to impart to you. From there, I worked at document delivery company Infotrieve when it was based in Los Angeles back in 2000. I have my own private company where I do consulting, and I've taught classes as far as New Zealand and Australia, as well as elsewhere. So there's a bit of that. And then worked in the corporate world again at Amgen, the largest biotech company, out of Thousand Oaks, California, where I had a team of 13 people reporting to me, as well as working as a co-director, a co-manager, reporting to a director of a global team. And right now I'm at a nonprofit organization a natural history museum with multiple sites. So with that background, and that's a selfie I did, by the way, for an initiative we had for social media 2 weeks ago that the Alliance of Museums, the American Alliance of Museums, asked people to do. So there you go. Okay, so I want you to think about your situation, what it is now, and what it could be in the future as we go through this webinar. You know, what are your expectations for this webinar, and think about what you hope to get out of it for participating. And thank you for being a part of it. What type of organization are you in? What kind of job do you have? Are you a decision maker, or do you negotiate things? Believe it or not, you are a negotiator a lot of times, and you may not realize it. And I want you to consider your real life's challenges and stories. And if you have questions or you want to do some follow-up later, let me know about that too. Okay, so when do I negotiate and when do I partner? Well, I negotiate when, or I should negotiate when there's going to be multiple providers for what I want. For instance, if you're looking at a library system, or you're looking at a subscription agency, or those kinds of things, you're going to have a lot of choices, which you will be able to narrow down. So you'll certainly want to be able to negotiate all sorts of things: terms and conditions, prices, implementation, service of all sorts, all that kind of thing. You want to also negotiate when really all you really want is a good price. You don't want extravagant partnerships and whatnot. You really are looking at what the lowest price you can get for what I'll call a commodity service, or a relative commodity service. And you also want to negotiate when, like me, I'm a solo librarian, so I don't have a staff. I have wonderful volunteers. I have some work study students that help out, but it's me, and I have a couple of sites that I'm responsible for. So you know, I need to negotiate all sorts of things, both internally and externally, as well as with partners. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Now, partnerships, on the other hand, are really good when you think, or you already have a multi-year, long-standing relationship with your vendors or with other organizations that you deal with. And also, it's a great way, a great implementation to use when you're in a lot of change. Maybe you know, we've all gone through the horrendous economy, ups and downs, and ups, and hopefully further ups. In organizations like mine, where some of the senior management our director of the museum has announced her retirement, so there'll be changes in the future. Meanwhile, all sorts of other stuff is going on around here with different things. And in your organizations, I'm sure there's lots of different things that come up at different times that are change. Change management is an issue. So with certain kinds of services, a partnership might be a really good choice. So let's get into talking about some specifics. Let's talk about negotiation in particular. When you are a customer, think of yourself as a customer, and I'm going to focus a lot on the whole buying stuff aspect of things, because that's really where the most value in the short term is. So if you're a customer, you want to know, or you find out a lot of things about the companies and the service providers you're dealing with. First of all, you really want to understand that vendor's industry. You know, if they're a publisher, what's going on in the publishing industry. Just in the recent past, we've had Springer and Nature announce that they're merging. We've had other large publishers announce all sorts of different things. So you need to understand who they are, how big they are, what's their position in the industry. Are they a leader? Are they doing a lot of interesting technological stuff? Are they noted for giving really good deals with consortia or with individual institutions of a certain type? Are they noted for other things? That you need to know. So you also need to understand the vendor's business operations and needs. You know, what's their bottom line? We've all heard about certain big publishers and what their focus is as far as the common thought. They're really interested in only their profit margin, in hearsay, while we know that what they're trying to do is they're really trying to keep in good business. They want to do advanced technology implementations. It costs money to do those things, all that kind of stuff. So we need to, as customers, need to understand where are they coming from, what's their key objectives. With their personnel, we need to understand who they are. A lot of times you're dealing with people who actually have library degrees and or have had multiple years experience in our industry, and maybe have worked for 2 or 3 different organizations, publishers, for instance, or information service providers of another sort, ILS companies. So they get it. They understand who we are. And we want to understand that and appreciate that and work with them in that regard. And then you also want to understand who are their main customer set. Are they large institutions or small institutions? Are they the government sector or the private sector? Are they, do they have multiple different kinds of customers with different segmentation? All of those factors are really important to understand in order for you to be able to deal with them most effectively. Now, on the other hand, the vendor, if they're good, and we hope that they are, they need to do similar kinds of things on your industry. Who are you? Where is your position? For instance, when I worked at a large biotech company, I wanted to make sure that they understood that, not to push that around, but to say, you know, I work for a very large company. We are a private company. We have certain security needs. We have certain information needs because we have a global team, you know, those kinds of things. We're also #1, we feel, or the top tier in our industry, that kind of thing. In the museum, it's the same kind of thing. I may be nonprofit, but the nonprofit sector is an industry, if you will. And so to understand that the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County is one of the largest natural history museums in the United States, if not the world, and we have amazing science and history and other kinds of things here. And so that's the kind of thing I would hope the vendor understands about me and what my needs are, and I'm not just some generic customer. But again, if my bottom line is just price in a negotiation standpoint, that may be almost immaterial. But the vendor should also know how I operate. What's my fiscal year? I'm a solo librarian versus a librarian with a bunch of teammates and staff. So what are my needs? The fact that we have technology challenges, but we also have some technology enhancements here. So what are those, and how do they play with the services that vendor is providing? So think about your situation as I'm saying these things, because that's the kind of stuff you want to bring to the table when you're doing these kinds of things. You also hope that they know who you are. Now, because I've been around a long time, I would hope they have some sense of the fact that I have experience in multiple sectors, that I think I know what I'm talking about, that I do appreciate what they're doing, you know, those kinds of things. If you're new to the whole thing, your background is still new, and they wouldn't know much about you, but that's okay. They need to understand that that's the case, and in a good way, and not to take advantage of that in a negative way. And then bottom line is they need to understand what is the customer's expectations. Because I'm a solo librarian, in my case, I have different needs than, say, when I was part of a large team and with a lot more and different kinds of expectations in the private sector. And so if you're in the private sector, you know, you have your list of what your company expects and what your parameters are for when payments are due, or how you do your negotiations, and what kind of legal issues there are. So you're hoping that the vendor also is aware of that. And it's up to each side, if you will, to educate the other as need be. Now, when you go into a grocery store, or you go into a department store, you don't need a very detailed explanation. You just want that item that you want to buy, point to where it is, get it for a decent price, and out the door you are, or offline after you've done it online. So it's a similar kind of situation here. Okay, but the bottom line here is that trust matters. we as customers must understand that vendor base, product line versus what's a customized offering, so that we know that, okay, XYZ stuff is for a certain base amount of money. If we want something specialized for our organization or for our implementation, that might require additional funds or resources to make that available, and we should expect to have to pay that extra and not expect everything under the sun to come with that base price. We also need to understand what the pricing structures are that are being offered. Is it, if in a case of technical stuff, is it by number of seats? Is it by number of concurrent users? Is it by physical location? A lot of things are priced by how many employees are in your organization. Others are by how many research people are in your organization versus how many total, how many locations you have versus a single one. So those kinds of things we need to understand. We also need to know how terms and conditions apply for our specific environment, that if we're a government type institution, that there's certain rules and regulations that we have to operate on versus being nonprofit or being a academic or private for that matter. Now, vendors are not evil, and neither are customers, but sometimes that you wonder. And I've had my own instances where negotiation doesn't always work, it fails. And sometimes because the vendor that I'm dealing with is too large, has changed management. I can think of one in particular recently where they don't know me as a customer. They even when I've asked them to look at our payment history and all that, it was basically irrelevant because they were just not willing. They were just unwilling to compromise at all, or even to discuss anything. And that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. But that's where in numbers there is strength as opposed to in single. And that's where collaboration with other institutions or other like customers are really important. Okay, so but customers. The worst thing you can do is to be that customer that goes to the vendor and starts yelling at them, no matter what, and you may feel perfectly justified that their pricing or their customer service or their product had glitches or whatever it is. But you know what? When somebody yells at me, that's the last thing I'm going to do is want to talk to them in a coherent, decent way. So just think of that the next time you really get mad at a particular service provider. It makes you feel better for a minute, but does it really work? I don't know. So now, on the same time, the vendor needs to understand your buying decision process, your time frame, as far as when you need to get things done. And if you have only a few weeks to buy something because it's near the end of your budget year, most vendors understand that, and they try to accommodate as best they can. They also want to understand what your budget situation is. So you don't give away the store by saying, I have X dollars to spend necessarily, but you do want to give them a sense of you are okay with the kind of pricing that they have as far as their resource, or up front I say, you know what, that's way out of my price range. There's no way I can get your product the way you've got it priced. What else, what options are there? And sometimes there are options, and many times there's options. So that they need to understand that too. And the reason for that is because this is something Stephen Covey has called in his Speed of Trust book, the trust tax. When you trust somebody you're working with, it's just like you buy from the people you like. When you have a very strong amount of trust with the person, chances are the transaction or the negotiation will go very fast, and you're going to get the best price, the lowest cost at a reasonable rate. But if there is no trust or very little trust, chances are it's going to take a really long time. It's going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to cost you a lot of time. It's going to cost you a lot of effort, and it might be very complicated. So this is a rendition, my rendition of a chart that's in Stephen Covey's book on that. And so think about that. So and one of the things he talks about is that trust is something that can be learned and taught, rather, to how to make it most effective. So I'll leave it to you to investigate further on that piece. So okay, so optimizing the negotiation process. Understand your organizational needs. Really understand the big picture, because you're going to need to articulate that to the vendor. One of the conversations I had recently with a major public librarian, library director, is that a lot of us don't articulate properly what our needs are to the vendor. If we don't do that, how can we expect them to work with us in the best way possible? So that's one thing. The next thing is know your bottom line. Know your bottom line price, or I should say the ceiling of the pricing that you can go to. Know also the terms and conditions of what the implementation is all about. There may be some legal issues as far and security issues. It might be a certain time frame involved. There may be that you need to have user IDs versus having IP recognition, or vice versa. You know, there's lots of different things about the product and service you're looking for. So you need to know that as well. And that helps optimize the process. Look at what solutions meet your needs. So do some homework. Understand. I use the major association meetings, excuse me, to check it out, especially when I'm not ready yet. Those are great things to do, whether it's ALA, AALL, SLA, ASIST, other kinds of meetings, RLIS, and SAA, all those other acronyms, and go to consumer shows and other kinds of things like that, because you want to understand what's out there, what's going to really work for you based on what you need, and then start talking to people. Ask them, saying, you know what, I'm not ready yet to buy something, but I really want to understand your product and service. And any vendor worth their salt is going to more than happy talk to you and be happy that you told them, I'm not going to buy today, I'm going to buy tomorrow. But they're going to try to get you to buy today, of course, but it'll give you something to start from. Look at the alternatives, because when you're looking down a path of certain needs and requirements, look at who else is offering them. If you have a library system or knowledge management system you're looking at, look at what's out there, what kind of features, functions, and what works for you. It might be the best in the world, but maybe it's just not right for you. Or maybe it's exactly what you need, and then investigate that further. So look at competitive alternatives. Do your homework in that regard. References. The vendors will always provide you or want to provide you with their references. And you know darn well they're going to be good references, because why would they tell you about them? What you need to do is to look at your own and find, through word of mouth or whatever, other references to really understand, gee, is what I'm being told really valid? And a lot of times it is, and sometimes you may find other information out, and it's really good to understand that, so you can develop the right questions back to the vendor and really understand it properly. One thing to be aware of, and this was true when I was a vendor, and this was true, has been true when I've been a customer. Beware the slick demonstrations. What used to be called vaporware. You know, it really looks cool and neat and flashy and all that on the demonstration floor or in the webinar, but does it really, under the covers, do what the persons have said it does, and do it for the way you need it? Or are they emphasizing a whole bunch of things that are really neat, whiz bang, gee, color flashing, all that other stuff, but so what? It's not what I need. I need X, Y, Z, and you're giving me A, B, C. So that's all well and good, but really I want to know about this and this and this. So just be a little skeptical. If it looks too good to be true, as they say, it probably is. But, you know, again, be aware and do your homework. And then last of all, in this regard, do a gut check. Say, gee, does it feel right? If it feels pretty good, gut feel, then chances are it is good. And when you implement something, no matter what it is, no matter how happy you are with it, after 2 or 3 years, technology changes, people change, your needs change, everything changes these days. In fact, even faster than 2 or 3 years sometimes. So you really want to revisit that and do a checkpoint. Like, for instance, I had renewals of major implementations this year of 2 different things, and so I did my due diligence and said, gee, is this the right solution for me? And in one case, I stuck with the vendor I'm with, because they're really good for what I need, and in the other case I changed one because, gee, my needs are different, or the service I was getting was a bit not quite what I wanted, and I had other reasons, so it's those kinds of things you want to look at. All right, now negotiation can be more than just the price. Annual maintenance, maybe you may not be able to get any lower price, but gee, maybe they might give you additional maintenance support for no extra charge, and there's many variations of that kind of thing. You might be able to get additional back files as part of the deal for the same price, or in the case of one subscription agent, publisher, I should say, they happen to be a publisher of several different titles, and I was able to get 2 or 3 different titles for what would have cost me 1 title in the old days, because they had some flexibility with one that they were trying to promote, and by getting the 2 or 3, I was able to get a much better deal than if I tried to buy them individually, and they were all appropriate for my needs, so that was good. Or it might be they have additional products and services that would be applicable to what I need, and so that's another negotiation point. It might be that there's alternative online content available, to be more specific, maybe in a fee-based product that you're getting. So look at that. There might be special issues. There might be a subscription for a journal, an electronic journal, for instance, but they might have a special issue that's either free or it's basically free from a access standpoint because it's open access. And there's more and more trend toward that, and so you want to see when that's possible if pricing is a particular concern to you, which it is to most of us. And then another aspect is maybe if you are a publisher of information, as my institution is, then maybe you, by providing content, you can also get a discount on accessing that service where your content would be provided. And I'm thinking of services like BioOne and others like that, where institutions have their publications available, and because of that, there might be some negotiation on pricing or terms and conditions with such a provider such as them. Okay, and then training. There's lots of options these days. In the old days, you'd either have to have somebody fly in to wherever you are to give a training class on the product and service for 1 or more days, and the costs involved with that, or you would have to go there. And certainly that's still, an option, but there's also online training, such as a webinar kind of thing like what we're doing today, or there might be some modules that you can do online at your convenience, both up front and then maybe as an ongoing basis. So there's those kind of things that might be part of your negotiation. And the other aspect which we used when I was in the corporate world was sometimes you're spending a lot of money or say in my current situation where we don't have a lot of money, and you want to promote the product and service. All vendors like to promote things, so they might help you with collateral, meaning brochures, getting brochures printed that have their logo on it, but also yours, that you pass out to all of your patrons or all of your staff and researchers, and or help develop an online presence in a blog or those kinds of things. Again, over and above what just the price alone is, that will enable you to do lots of fun and different things. And then the last thing in this regard is the availability and quality of the account rep and service support. If you've had a great account rep for a while, it's great to keep them because they understand who you are and what you're all about, and that's worth something. And the business knows that. We spent a lot of time when I was in the corporate world at IBM making sure that our accounts, when we transitioned people because they got promoted or they went to other responsibilities, that there was a good transition time, but also we really invested in making sure that we understood that account, large and small, and give them the support as appropriate, and you would hope that all vendors would do that today. And so you want to use that as a leverage point for yourselves as well. Okay. What do you need to do? You must know your own business. Just because you're a small cog in a big wheel of a huge organization, whether it's government, private sector, or whatever, you should know what you're all about. What are your mission and goals? What are your key objectives this year? In the museum world here, we're doing some major new temporary exhibits. We're doing some other kinds of things over at La Brea Tar Pits, for instance, as an example. And so, you know, knowing that that's going on and how I fit into that and my services fit into that and support that, you need to do that for your organization and understand how these products and services you're looking at, how they're going to be enhancing your ability to do what you need to do for your organization. So know your business and be able to articulate that back to the vendor. Make sure that you check, especially if you're investing a lot of time and effort and particularly money, you know, the vendors can bring to the table product experts that ensure an understanding and a proper implementation of what you want, especially when it comes to computer tools that are new and different. And so if you're one of those customers that are investing a lot and have a lot on the line, then you know, it's very important that that vendor be aware of that so they can bring in their people that are the discovery engine expert and really help you understand how you can tweak it so it works for you, or those librarians who are the catalogers from their old jobs and are now part of the metadata staff of their products and services, or whatever the case is. So that's another aspect of it. Be aware that oftentimes the product as is can be offered for a limited time for a trial, but not for a complete full implementation where, oh, you're going to use it for a year or two or three, and then you're just going to let it go because it was free all that time. Well, that's not really a good way to do it. You really want to be cognizant of, yeah, you can get at least a portion of the product so you can try it out. And honestly, if the vendor is not willing to provide that to you, especially if it's a new or complicated tool, then maybe you just walk away, say, okay, then I'll go to another vendor if there's multiple vendors of making that available. I've done it, you know, they'll walk away too, but you know, you can too. On the other hand, if you do have all this customization you want to do or specialty things, some of that they may be willing to do because you're a good customer or whatever, but some of it may just cost extra, and just know that that's going to be the case. Think about this, the offering that you're looking at. Is the base product fine? No, and you know, it's the kind of thing where you can bet your business on it, and it's solid, it's been around, it's getting tweaked or enhanced, and that's all good? Or are you one of those risk-taking organizations or people willing to explore new and different things? So if it's a beta version of a software package or a new implementation of content in a different way that's not been done before, are you okay with the fact that it might break 3 times every week? But that's okay because what it's providing enables you to do something new and different and whatnot. And so you want to know which or both do you need, and what you can tolerate. And the pricing that's offered has to be reasonable for both sides. Of course, we would hope that the price that something is something we can afford to pay for and then provide to our folks. But the vendor is looking at, I can't give you it for nothing, and in order for me to be in business, it's got to be X price or above in order for me to keep going and to develop it and be in existence 3 years from now, those kinds of things. So the pricing, when you look at it, it has to be reasonable on both sides. If it's not, and we all can cite instances where we got a really good deal because it was a promotional thing, and on the other hand, we also know that there were some offerings that were just outrageous, and we said, nope, there's no way, and that's it. Even big institutions, very big institutions, have walked away from big things because they were just unreasonable. So the pricing needs to be reasonable on both sides. And as I mentioned, the vendor will walk away if the price you want is too low or the expectations are too high. You want all these things, but you only want to pay $100. Well, that's not going to happen. We all would like a wonderful, fancy car, but maybe our budget can't afford it. Or maybe we want something else, and it's just not appropriate. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, so a little bit more specific on e-content licensing, because that is pretty complicated, and the negotiation process for that is really important, especially these days, right, and in the future. So pricing structure, it varies by industry, it varies by size of the organization, and a lot of other factors. So what a private sector client or customer will pay for a particular subject resource is probably a lot different than a government client or a nonprofit. And so you want to understand that. If you're big, you're small, you have one location, multiple locations, you have a large research staff, you have a small research staff, you have one of the, like I say, one physical site or multiple sites. You may have a lot of remote users, but then again, maybe not. Maybe everybody is really on site. And so there are issues with that. There's as far as pricing and technical implementation, and then the security structure for that. If you're in unfortunately, due to all the hackings that have been going on recently, and they're going to increase, it looks like, that more than decrease, even government and public sector arenas are really need to be stepping up to the plate on looking at a security of information, in addition to the private sector and the banks and all the others that we would hope are checking into that. And then the next thing is who really does access and use the content. That can make a large difference in how much something costs. For instance, in an organization that, say, has 20,000 employees, maybe only 8,000 are research types. And so if a license agreement says it's FTE, full-time equivalents, and they want to charge you for all 20,000 employees, you say, wait. I only have about 8,000 people that would even have a need to see this. So why am I paying for a price for 20,000 when you and I both know only 8,000, and of those 8,000, I could even qualify it further as to who is seeing it. In my organization, we have only a couple of hundred employees, and I know that's only a third of them are the research types. And so when I looking at my licensing agreements, I say, I don't agree with a FTE kind of pricing. I want it for the people who are actually going to use the product and service. And maybe, you know what, I don't need an institutional license. Maybe I get a single license for the individual department or the individual involved. What's interesting about this, the challenge these days, is all of the publishers and whatnot see the library as, oh wow, cash on the barrelhead, because so many eyeballs are looking at the content every day. Well, in a public library, an academic library, maybe in a large private sector organization, that's true. In places like mine, where I'm a specialized library, where frankly there's very few people looking on a day-to-day basis at a particular resource, an institutional license for a lot of stuff isn't appropriate. So you really need to understand your situation and what works and what differences there are, because that can really affect what pricing you should pay. You may look at subscription versus pay-per-use. Maybe that infrequent use I mentioned is something that, you know what, I'll buy it by the piece, because even if I bought 10 of it or 20 of it, it's still a heck of a lot less than paying an annual subscription. On the other hand, gee, we use it all the time. It has so much value for who we are and what we do that a subscription is so much better. And these token packages where you buy 100 of this or 50 of that for a certain price, which is better than pay per use, but not quite as advantageous as a subscription, but still better. Maybe that's an option, although that's very hard to budget. So think about those things. And the last on this list, which is full content for internal use. In the corporate sector, it wouldn't be unusual to want to buy the content of an entire database, bring it in-house, and then say, okay, vendor, I'm paying you a good price, but that's it. You're not seeing what we're doing with it because that's a competitive advantage. It might be true even in a public sector where you want to massage using your own tools a particular data set, and with big data becoming the big thing, the raw data, we have a lot of scientific data, for instance, we're gathering, gets put to the federal government for NSF grants, that kind of thing. We may want to bring it in-house and massage that data and manipulate it and do different things. And maybe we don't need to have a connection to the vendor, so that's a whole different pricing structure. So that's another one to think about. So let's really think about taking the negative out of negotiations. Always look to say, you know what, we're in it to win it. As is said, we really want to make sure that you, Mr. and Ms. Vendor, are in business because we want to rely on you for the future, but at the same time, I want it at a reasonable price with the right kinds of terms and conditions for me. But I'm going to go into this looking at it as we're both going to win on it. The second thing is don't drive a vendor into the ground, because if you do and just nickel and dime them, no one wins with that. Ask for what is reasonable. Know yourself when you're on a long-term subscriber, for instance, to an e-resource, what the percentage increases are and how many dollars of change that represents, and match it against what the vendor's telling you, so you really have a reasonable conversation going. If you run into problems because your budget was just cut for whatever reason, contact the vendors, tell them, hey, you know what? We just got cut because of this, that, and the other reason, and that contract we had, we need to really rethink that because conditions have changed. Do all the detail work and keep your senior management informed, and only bring them in when it's time to sign the deal or when you're at a critical juncture to optimize the leverage. I purposely hold back on my senior people meeting with a lot of different service providers because that's a privilege, not a given. And they do the same for me. I don't get to meet all their senior executives all the time, but I look to try, because that's the other thing, that the higher you go, the bigger chance that they're able to do something about the situation you have. But they really need to understand what it is. So if you revert to, it says in the contract X, Y, and Z, you're probably already lost. And I even found myself doing that this past year. And as soon as I said it, I thought, uh-oh, that's it. We're done. Not going anywhere. Didn't even bother having a future conversation, because that was that. As I said earlier, the vendors can fire customers, and they will, because, gee, you cost too much. Too much effort and too much investment in time and money to get something done for the amount of revenue or visibility of customer set and that kind of thing. And maybe you're just not willing to at least negotiate halfway. And usually the vendor's willing to meet more than halfway. So that's something to keep in mind. And also know you too can walk away. I've done it several times. It hurts sometimes to say, nope. It's like walking into that store and seeing that wonderful item you want to buy, but you know your budget really can't afford it. So you just got to walk away. So for existing contract renewal negotiations, both sides should know the value of the service and content being provided relative to the payment for it. Know what current competition is out there, and I emphasize the word current because what was competition 2 years ago may be different today. Be prepared before you talk on the phone or have an in-person meeting. There should be preset agenda of what you're going to talk about with an expectation of a conclusion or decision at the end. And it's not just casual reception kind of thing. This is when you're having a formal meeting, make sure that it's a valuable one. Be consistent in what your terms and conditions or expectations are. It keeps respect on both sides, and it increases the trust, and things will happen quicker and with a mutual beneficial resolution. Excuse me. So these negotiation techniques can be used a lot of other places. For instance, I use them all the time with my senior management. I need to be able to get a bigger budget for a particular item, or gee, we need certain kinds of furniture for something I didn't expect, or gee, new photographic equipment, or new license for new content for some research being done. Use these techniques internally. Use them also in collaborating with other departments. One of the values I found is our book budget is a very small one, and so working with the departments who are the experts, really working in collaboration with them, utilizing the fact that the Amazons.coms of the world, the Bakers and Taylors of the world and stuff, there's different ways to buy stuff that maybe doesn't have to go through the library but should be in coordination with the library. That's really important. The picture you see there is 5 years ago, the library was all under plastic when I was hired. Now, the bottom picture is what it looks like today, and that was because I collaborated and negotiated with the operations folks to help me physically move things. I worked with the senior management to understand what kind of short-term emergency money I needed to get things going with a temporary help, and all sorts of volunteer work and other kinds of things. So, there's variations on what you can do for that. Content purchases and licensing might be something that you share with other institutions that are like you, or even across the country. Going beyond national borders gets a lot more complicated, but at least internally, or maybe even beyond a state border if you're a government agency. But there's ways to do that. Collaborate on that. Use consortia. Work study sharing. We have a University of Southern California right across the street, so we have work study students. When one department is busy with something else and can't utilize their work study student, or if I'm away for a day, I'm my work study student, I offer that person to another department for the one day if they need extra help. It just works very well. Space use for different projects or visitors. Of course, you want people to use the library, but sometimes they have a particular need that they just need space for an hour or two. More than it doesn't cost anything. In fact, it's beneficial to offer that and collaborate that way. Now, partnerships, real quick, because those are a little bit simpler yet more extensive. And the customer partnership life cycle starts out just developing a mutual understanding of each other, because you're in it for the longer term. So you really want to understand everything about who you are, what you bring to the table, what the limitations you have are as far as resources, or the expansiveness of your resources. Maybe you have programming people available that could do a whole bunch of interesting things, working with the vendor so that you could help enhance their product that's in beta right now, and get what you need. Particularly, and then they could offer it later on for sale to others and amortize the costs of their development side beyond just working with you. After a while, a couple of years, it becomes mature, an established, defined working relationship. You know each other, you trust each other, you share information that's valuable from a marketplace standpoint back to the vendor. The vendor shares new software developments or new content availability, those kinds of things, all really good. But then after a couple of years, you become very well established and almost to the point where too established. And so you really need to review it, just take a step back. You know, the company will do the same thing. There might be legal and financial reasons to reevaluate because of conditions and security issues, whatever. And then it becomes a really good cycle to review. So the elements of a partnership, in addition to all the wonderful things I've mentioned about negotiation, is you really need to understand what the meaning of a real long-term partner is. If you're just lower price focused, that's not a partnership. If you can't trust, then don't think you can give all of your time or effort. Don't do it. It's not good for the vendor, and it's not good for you. However, conversely, if lowest price isn't the issue, and you do trust them, and you've worked with them, and you know that you want to really use a piece of your resources to get things done, then that's a good reason to have a partnership. Due diligence is really important. You know, you want to see conflicts of interest, either legally, financially, or just responsibilities. Check with your local institution, legal people, but you also want to look at, you know, if we partner with them, what happens if they go out of business next year? Or are they potentially going out of business in 1 year or 2 years, and that's why they're being so good at partnering? Or are they really expanding? You know, one of the things about all of the venture capital being invested in a lot of information services is some vendors are able to now put a lot of more resources into things. So, you know, there's some advantages to that kind of stuff, and you should know about that and check into it. You really need to get collaboration for a partnership up the line of your management chain and your legal people and your financial people, so that there's no surprises. It might be that you're working with other departments. You need to do that as well, and they, on the vendor side, need to be doing that as well and not making commitments that they can't keep. Of course, things can happen overnight sometimes, and you can't anticipate that, but barring that, those are really important. And with a partnership over a couple of years, you can really work together to improve vendor services, help them be more competitive, help you be more competitive in what you're doing in your responsibilities in your industry. And keep in mind that there might be unintended or unforeseeable consequences of what you do, and those are so vague, I know, but just keep in mind that there might be some pitfalls, and you really need to do your due diligence just to see, and then if some things start to happen, to then reconfigure that partnership or maybe end that partnership if really it's no longer a viable alternative. So clear delineation of work products are imperative, much like a consulting deal. All the fundamentals need to be explained unless and agreed to up front, unless you're hiring that vendor basically to be your think tank to help you really work almost as an internal consultant and staff member as well as a partner, and then it's a little different, and that you really communicate your expectations back and forth at all times. That's really imperative. And if there's not just the two of you, but maybe a third organization or a fourth organization involved, one of those organizations has to be the central focal point for all of the actions. Otherwise, there's finger pointing going around, and then nothing gets done, and nobody's happy. And lastly, you really have to understand the motivation on your side and on their side as to why you want a partner over the long term, and review that on a regular basis, and fix your agreements to meet maybe changing needs over time, because that's only going to be good for all of you. So partnerships are a journey. You need to communicate, talk along the way. It takes time. Things are going to not go right every day. Things are going to kind of go in the ground, and then you're going to recover. But that's that working relationship. Just like any relationship, you know, you got to work at it. beta trials, advisory boards, conferences are all part of the deal. So, with a partnership, they may want you to promote their product. Well, maybe you can do it by saying, you know what, I have this kind of implementation I'm doing, and I'm using XYZ publishers' content to do it with. Or you can be, if you're legally allowed to, be participating in an advisory board with them, or other kinds of things like that. And you really want to have lengthy conversations, but not for the sake of conversations, but as you're going along as to what you want to accomplish. Again, the communication and what you hope to achieve, and do checkpoints on it to make sure you're achieving those things. And even if you fail, I had a partnership with one organization years ago on visualization of search result information. And ultimately it failed, but we learned a great deal. I only used a certain amount of resources, time and money, and same with the vendor. And it was a learning opportunity, and that was really good. So in this just about an hour, we talked about negotiation versus partnership, knowing what to use and when to use it, negotiate when there's plenty of providers, that negotiation is more than just the price you're paying, that a partnership is usually a multi-year, long-standing relationship with the vendor or other organization, that you should think about partnering if you're in a lot of change and tumultuous times where you need some flexibility and you want somebody to work with you as those changes happen, and that when you're dealing with e-content, and who isn't these days, that it has many elements, and you really want to negotiate to get the best deal, and that can even change over time. So I leave you with two things. One is trust is a must, and communication is critical. So with that, that's my blog, which is my personal view, not that of the museum by any stretch. And it's called Librarian Views, and I did update it finally last night. I've been so busy. My personal email is there. You can also reach me here at the museum. But any questions, I guess I'm open to doing that. So I'm going to take myself off the screen here and turn it back over to Sandy or Steve.
Thanks, Richard. Steve here. Sandy, we've only got a couple of minutes. Richard as well. Do you want to take questions, or do you need to finish at the top of the hour?
I'm okay. I can go over 1 o'clock. I can go past the hour, so that's not a problem.
We'll be careful, but let's go ahead and see if
for a few minutes anyway.
They're about 30 seconds behind us, so we'll watch as they come in. There is one that came in. Latricia asked if you would be able to provide a copy of the slides. Is that something that you're open to doing?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay, and if you send those to me, I'll post them on the actual YouTube event page so people know where that is.
Yeah.
We did get a couple of comments that these tips have been very helpful, and some thank yous. Sandy, Dr. Hirsch, did you want to say something before we start to wrap up?
Thank you, Richard. That was great, and I know really valuable for everybody who was participating today. I just want to thank you. I don't actually have any questions for you at this time, but I'm really grateful that you kicked off our Library 2.0 webinar series, and I'm excited about holding future ones of these and sponsoring them as well. So, Steve, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. We'll give it just a couple of seconds because people are delayed behind us.
Yeah, and if people have questions in the future, they can contact me. That's fine. And if they're in Los Angeles, they should come visit.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
I thought you did a super job. I was really impressed with the organization and the way in which you approached it. So I want to thank you as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't see any questions coming in, so why don't we stop here and we'll just thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you everybody for watching, and those of you who watch the recording, we appreciate your participating.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
We'll sign off. Bye-bye.
Bye.